In this video, we're going to be looking at the definition and the properties of a kite. And a kite is a quadrilateral, a four-sided figure with exactly two pairs of consecutive congruent sides. Let's write that down and then talk about it after. So a kite is a quadrilateral with exactly two pairs of consecutive congruent sides. All right, and the best way to see what I mean by this is to actually see the figure. So our kite will look something like this. We'd have one pair of consecutive, so they're next to each other, consecutive congruent sides. So that is consecutive and congruent to that. And then we have another pair. So yes, there are two pairs of consecutive congruent sides. So that would be congruent to that. Now, the reason it says, the definition says exactly two pairs of consecutive congruent sides is this. If we had three or all four of these sides were congruent to each other, it would not be a kite. The two sides here have to be different in length from the two sides here. So they're exactly two pairs of consecutive congruent sides. It's also different from a parallelogram in this way. The opposite sides, so here and here, for example, these opposite sides are not congruent and they are not parallel. In this case also, here and here, these opposite sides are not congruent and they are also not parallel. So this is a very different, unique shape. All right, so that is what our kite looks like. We have these two congruent sides and these two congruent sides, and the congruent sides, again, are next to each other. All right, so there are a few properties in addition to the definition that we need to know. So the first property that we need to know in addition to the definition is about the diagonals. There's always a unique behavior with these diagonals, and in the kite's case, the diagonals are perpendicular to each other. So if you take a look, the diagonal here and the diagonal here will always meet at 90 degrees. So we need to know that, so we can write it down. Diagonals are perpendicular. All right, what else do we need to know about the kite? Well, we also need to know that if a quadrilateral is a kite, then there's only going to be one pair of angles that are congruent. So I'm going to draw a kite, another kite. Let me turn it the other way so we get used to seeing it multiple ways. So those are congruent, and those are congruent. We have that congruent to that congruent to that. So in a kite, in every kite, there's going to be one pair of congruent angles. The angles are opposite to each other, but here we go. Angles here and here will be congruent. Not these two, and I'll describe to you how we know it's these two that are congruent to each other. So the angle that is congruent to the other angle has to be between two non-congruent sides. So see, this angle is between two non-congruent sides, so is this one, between two non-congruent sides. And so that's how we know that these two angles are congruent to each other. So let's write this down. We know that there is exactly one pair of opposite angles that are congruent. All right, so that's really what we need to know about the kite. So let's take what we know about the kite and let's look at an example problem. Okay, so here in our example, we know it's a kite because we were told it's a kite. And we are being asked to find angle GFJ. So angle GFJ is over here. And now, if you recall, this angle, since it's between two non-congruent sides, that means this angle is going to have the same measure as the other angle that's between two non-congruent sides. So we can put our angle marker here. And by the way, this is not accurate here. I want to just make sure it is very clear that these two are not equal to each other. All right, but the red ones are equal to each other. These two angles definitely are equal to each other. Now, since it is a quadrilateral, we know that the sum of the angles have to be 360 degrees. So if I take 128 and add it to 72 and add up this angle, I should probably write in the right way, right? All right, so I'm going to add the measure of angle F and the measure of angle H. Then if I do all of that, all four angles added up together should give you 360. However, we do know that the measure of angle F and the measure of angle H are the same thing. So I can replace this thing here with the measure of angle F. So that means 128 plus 72 plus measure of angle, measure of angle F. Let's rewrite that. 128 plus 72 plus the measure of angle F plus the same thing, because it's equal, measure of angle F will give us 360. Well, since that's there two times, we don't actually have to write it twice. So we get here 128 plus 72 plus 2 times the measure of angle F will give us 360. Now we have to solve it algebraically. We know that when you add these two things up, you get 200 plus 2 times the measure of angle F gives us 360. Feel free to take 200 from both sides so we can get that alone. So we get that the measure of angle F, well, 2 times the measure of angle F, is equal to 160. So now we can go ahead, divide both sides by 2, so we can get rid of that, and we get that the measure of angle F is equal to 80, and that's it.